Sophie Carter typed like every keystroke was a small act of revenge. From the far corner of the open office, the voice she despised most cut through the air again. She's never gotten over me. Still hoping, I'm sure. Nathan's laugh rolled across the room like a bad smell. Sophie closed her eyes for one breath. After 8 months of being apart, he still acted like he owned her. And now he was performing for an audience. Something inside her snapped. Tomorrow was Next Group's annual gala. Everyone was expected to arrive with a date. She could already picture it. Nathan walking in with some polished nobody, throwing that smug look her way. Sophie grabbed her phone. She typed into the search bar, "Professional event companion, discreet, same-day booking." She scrolled until one profile stopped her cold. Ethan. Companion for corporate events. Direct, no drama, adaptable to any setting. Fee, $400. She frowned. The photos looked like they'd been lifted from a Forbes shoot. Sharp jaw, tailored coat, the kind of posture that belonged behind a boardroom table, not a rental profile. Something didn't add up. The price was almost insulting for someone who looked like that. She messaged him anyway. "I need a date for my company gala tomorrow. Can we meet today to go over details?" His reply came in 90 seconds. "Available at 7 p.m. You choose the place." She picked a quiet wine bar 3 blocks from her apartment. At exactly 7 p.m., Ethan walked through the door. Dark wool coat, no tie, hair neat but not overdone. He moved through the room without looking around, like a man who already knew where he was going. "Sophie?" he asked. "Ethan?" She stood. She shook hands. His grip was warm, unhurried. "Let's skip the small talk," Sophie said, pulling out her notes. "Tomorrow night. You're my boyfriend of 6 weeks. We met at a bookstore. That's our story. No improvising." "Understood," he said. "What's his name?" "Whose name?" "The one we're doing this for." Sophie paused. "Nathan. Sales team. My ex. What should I expect from him?" "Ego the size of this building. He'll try to provoke you or corner me. Don't let him." Ethan nodded once. No questions, no fuss. That steadiness unsettled her slightly. "Have you done this before?" she asked. "A few times," he said. "Not for the money." That line stayed with her. They spent 40 minutes building their cover story, how they met, his occupation, freelance business strategist, why they didn't talk about it much, he traveled constantly. Sophie laid out every detail. Ethan remembered all of it without writing a single thing down. At the end, he handed her a small card. "If something gets uncomfortable tonight, say sparkling water twice." She looked up. "Is that a code?" "It's a reminder that you won't need to handle anything alone." Walking home, Sophie turned the card over in her fingers. No man with that presence, that composure, that face worked for $400 a night. She had hired someone to play a role. But this man didn't feel like an actor. The Next Group gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Sophie wore a deep burgundy dress, elegant without trying. Ethan met her in the lobby at 7:55 p.m. in a charcoal suit that looked hand-sewn. Several women in the lobby noticed. Most didn't pretend otherwise. "You're nervous," he murmured as they walked toward the ballroom. "A little." "Don't be. You've already won." Inside, the room glittered. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, ambient jazz. About 90 colleagues mingled with champagne and small plates. And there was Nathan, stationed near the bar in the same navy suit he'd worn to Sophie's birthday dinner 10 months ago. When he spotted her, the laughter died on his lips. "He saw us," Sophie said quietly. "Good," said Ethan. They worked the room methodically. Karen from HR melted within 30 seconds of meeting Ethan.
Michael from finance, 15-year veteran, famously hard to impress.
ended up in a 20-minute conversation with Ethan about hedge fund restructuring and emerging market volatility. Michael looked like a man who had just found a new favorite puzzle. "Do you work in finance?" Michael asked directly. "Strategy consulting," Ethan replied. "Mostly mid-market companies navigating growth." "Interesting. Next Group could actually use someone like you. We're in the middle of a restructuring." "So I've heard," Ethan said naturally. Sophie caught that. "So I've heard." She filed it away. Nathan eventually drifted over, glass in hand, manufactured smile in place. "Sophie, great to see you here." He extended a hand toward Ethan. "I'm Nathan, Sophie's ex." "Ethan," he replied calmly. "Current." Nathan's smile thinned. "What do you do, Ethan?" "Business strategy. And you?" "Top sales performer at Next Group 3 years running." "Congratulations," Ethan said, without a single inflection of sarcasm. It was somehow worse than mockery. Nathan tried to pull Sophie aside. She refused. He pushed once more. Ethan stepped half a step forward, not aggressive, not theatrical, and said quietly, "She's answered you." A few nearby colleagues had noticed. Nathan left. Later, while they were on the dance floor, a silver-haired man in his 60s approached. Sophie recognized him immediately. David Hargrove, Next Group's chief operating officer. He rarely attended these events. "Ethan," David studied him. "Blake. That's an unusual surname in this industry." Ethan smiled. Unrevealing. "It's a common enough name." "Not Ethan Blake, it isn't." David kept watching him. "Do you have any connection to Blake Ventures?" Sophie looked at Ethan. Something shifted behind his eyes, barely visible, but there. "Blake is a common surname," he repeated pleasantly. David laughed softly and excused himself. But Sophie noticed he kept glancing back for the rest of the evening. In the cab home, she stared out the window. Blake Ventures. She pulled out her phone. The results loaded instantly. Blake Ventures, a New York-based private investment firm. Founded 4 years ago. Assets under management, over $2.3 billion. The website was sleek and almost aggressively sparse. No founder photos. But at the very bottom of the About page, founded by E. Blake, 2020. Sophie closed her phone slowly. E. Blake. It couldn't be. She called her friend Alex, a financial journalist, the next morning over lunch. "Blake Ventures," she said. "Tell me everything." Alex leaned forward. "One of the fastest growing private firms in the country. Incredibly private. The founder doesn't do press, no public appearances, almost no digital footprint. Rumored to be very young. Last name Blake, first initial E." Alex paused. "Why are you asking?" "Long story." "Does this involve a man?" Sophie said nothing. "Elena, Sophie, if you're getting involved with someone connected to that firm, be careful. That kind of money comes with that kind of secrecy." Then Alex pulled up something else. "Here's the thing, though. Blake Ventures? They own a significant stake in Next Group. Bought in about 14 months ago." Sophie felt the floor shift. That evening, William, Ethan, messaged her. "Can I see you tonight? I need to talk to you properly." She agreed. The address he sent was in the Upper West Side, a building with a marble lobby and a doorman in white gloves. The kind of building where you didn't ask what the apartment cost because the question itself would feel gauche. Ethan opened the door in a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Bookshelves floor-to-ceiling on one wall. A gourmet kitchen that smelled of something extraordinary. "Blake Ventures," Sophie said, before she was even fully through the door. He handed her a glass of wine. Sit down. Are you the founder? He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, she sat. You're a billionaire. On paper, roughly. And you work as a date for hire. I did, occasionally, for the reason I told you. Sometimes I want to be a person, not a portfolio. How many times? You're the third. The other two? A woman who needed a confident arm at a board dinner full of men who wanted her to feel small, and an 83-year-old widow who wanted a waltz partner at her granddaughter's wedding. He paused. I danced for 4 hours. Sophie stared at him. Don't tell anyone, he said. It'll ruin the mystique. She almost laughed. She caught herself. Ethan, you knew I worked at Next Group. From the beginning. He was quiet. When I mentioned the company name, during our first meeting? Yes. And you never thought to mention you were an investor. I didn't know how to say it without it changing everything. It does change everything. Does it change what happened between us? Sophie stood. I don't know what happened between us. I hired you. You knew things about me, about my company, that you never explained. And now I'm sitting in a $10 million apartment while you ask me if it matters. She picked up her bag. It matters, Ethan. Sophie, thank you for the wine. She walked out. In the cab, she pressed her palm flat against her leg to stop it from shaking. She was furious. She was embarrassed. And underneath both of those things, in a place she refused to examine, she was heartbroken. Because she had started to fall for him. Genuinely. For the man who remembered how she took her coffee, who asked real questions, who cooked pasta and seemed like the happiest version of himself doing it. At midnight, her phone lit up. Sophie. What happened between us was real. Not a performance, not a strategy. You were the first person in years who talked to me like I was just a man. I should have told you everything, I know that. If you're willing to hear it, all of it, I'm here. If not, I understand. But don't leave thinking you were a job. You were never a job. E. She read it 4 times, then put her phone face down. 3 days later, she arrived at work to find silence following her like a shadow. Whispers cut off when she turned corners. Karen from HR wouldn't make eye contact. At 10:45 a.m., an email from David Hargrove. Sophie, please come to my office at noon. Important matter. DH. David's office felt colder than she remembered. Karen was there too, holding a folder that Sophie already didn't trust. We've received some information about Ethan Blake, David began. What kind of information? Karen placed papers on the desk. Shell companies, transaction irregularities, undeclared assets. Sophie looked at them. Who put this together? That's not, was it Nathan? The silence was its own answer. Sophie, David continued carefully, Next Group cannot have employees whose personal relationships create reputational risk. We like you enormously. That's why we're handling this privately. And what does handling it privately mean? Karen leaned forward. Distance yourself publicly from Ethan Blake. Make it clear the relationship is over. Everything goes back to normal. You're asking me to break up with someone to keep my job. We're asking you to be practical. Sophie looked from one to the other. This is blackmail. This is corporate governance. The door opened. Nathan walked in. Sophie stood. Get out. I was just out. He left. David looked tired. Sophie picked up her bag. You have until end of day, David said. I'll think about it, she said, and walked out. She was in the elevator when she heard the commotion in the lobby below. She looked over the mezzanine railing. Ethan was standing in the next group lobby in a charcoal three-piece suit. He had 2 colleagues with him, both in suits, both moving with the quiet efficiency of people who handled important things. He was on the phone. He spoke briefly to the front desk. The receptionist went pale and reached for her headset. Sophie took the stairs. "What are you doing here?" she asked, slightly breathless. He turned. The executive mask slipped for just a second. "I heard what they did." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not letting it stand." "How did you even—" "I have people." He paused. "May I?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Conference room's on the left," she said. David, Karen, and 2 board-level directors sat across from Ethan Blake. Sophie sat beside him. Ethan didn't open with pleasantries. "You threatened to terminate Sophie Carter based on fabricated financial intelligence supplied by a disgruntled ex-employee. Let's talk about what actually happened." He walked through it in under 6 minutes. The shell companies were registered subsidiaries. The transactions were fully audited. The suspicious activity was standard international tax optimization used by half the Fortune 500. "Blake Ventures," he continued, "holds 15.4% of Next Group's common shares. That makes me, technically, one of your principal investors. And I'm going to be direct with you. If Sophie faces any form of retaliation, demotion, forced leave, reassignment, or termination, my firm will liquidate our Next Group position within 30 days. I'll also ensure that every serious investor in this city knows precisely why." The room was a photograph. "Furthermore," he said, turning to David, "I want Nathan removed from his position today. Documented cause: targeted workplace harassment." He stood and adjusted his jacket. "Sophie is one of the most capable people in this building. Whatever disagreements she and I have in our personal lives, and we have some, that has nothing to do with her value to this company." He glanced at Sophie. "Ready?" She stood. They walked out together. In the elevator, Sophie pressed the button for her floor and looked straight ahead. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" The doors opened. He held them. "Because no one has the right to use you as leverage." He paused. "And because I care about you. Genuinely." She stepped out. "Thank you," she said. "Always," he said. The doors closed. Sophie spent 2 weeks at home. The press had found the story. Billionaire confronts firm over employee, and her phone hadn't stopped. Nathan had been escorted out that same afternoon. David had sent a written apology and, strangely, a promotion. From Ethan, nothing. She Googled him properly now. Photos at industry summits, 2 profiles in finance publications. The sort of person who made serious lists. It felt surreal to watch a man pour her wine on a Tuesday night and then read about him in the same breath as terms like market disruptor and generational investor. On the 14th day, she booked a flight to Portland, where her college friend Jess had been living for 3 years. "You look like you haven't slept in 2 weeks, Jess said at the airport. "I haven't." She told Jess everything. Over wine, over 2 days, in full. Jess listened. Then she said, "You're being unfair to him. He lied. He kept something back. Those aren't the same thing. They are when the thing he kept back is, 'I'm secretly one of your bosses.' Sophie, he fell for you before he knew who you were. Then he found out and panicked. That's human." Jess leaned forward. "You asked him when you were already furious. Did you ever ask him calmly?" Sophie was quiet for a long time. On Thursday, Jess turned on the financial news. Blake Ventures announced today the divestment of all positions in consumer holdings and marketing conglomerates, including a 15.4% stake in Next Group Corporation. CEO Ethan Blake issued a brief statement citing a strategic refocus. Sophie's chest went tight. He sold his stake. He'd removed the conflict. Entirely. Unilaterally. "Sophie," Jess said quietly, "you're crying." "I know. Go home." He was not expecting anyone. When the doorbell rang at 9:15 p.m. on a Friday, Ethan assumed it was a package. He opened the door and stood very still. Sophie was on his doorstep with a carry-on and the expression of someone who had rehearsed this and thrown the rehearsal away. "You sold your stake," she said. "I did." "Why?" "Because you were right. It was a conflict. And because you matter more than the position." She came inside. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. Then Sophie said, "I need to ask you something, and I need the real answer." "Okay." "When you first agreed to meet me, before you knew where I worked, were you already interested? Or did Next Group change that?" Ethan got up. He went to his desk and came back with a folder. "Open it." Inside, printed emails, dozens of them, dated across the weeks they'd known each other. None sent. She read the first. "Sophie, it's been 1 week since our first conversation. I keep thinking about how clearly you see things. You walked into that cafe knowing exactly what you needed and exactly why. I haven't met anyone that direct in years. Maybe ever." The second. "Sophie, you talked about your work today like it was something you were building, not just doing. I've been in rooms with people worth 10 times what I am who couldn't say the same." The third. "Sophie, I think I'm falling in love with you. That hasn't happened in a very long time. It terrifies me, mostly because I know I'm going to have to tell you the truth soon, and I don't know who you'll be after." She read all of them. The last was from 3 days ago. "I sold the Next Group position today. Not to win you back, because you were right, and I should have done it the moment I realized the overlap. You asked me to be honest, so here it is, completely. I fell for you in that cafe. Not the Next Group employee, not the woman with the complicated ex. You, Sophie, who paid $400 to prove a point and carried it off perfectly. Who treated me like a regular person when I'd forgotten what that felt like. I don't know how to be without that anymore. I love you." Sophie sat with the folder in her hands for a long time. "Why didn't you send any of these?" "Because I was afraid they'd come across as manipulation." "And now?" "Now I'd rather look desperate than let you believe you were deceived." Sophie set the folder down. "Ethan Blake," she said carefully, "you are the most complicated, most aggravating, most— Is that a yes?" She looked at him. "It's a yes." He crossed the room in 3 steps and she met him halfway. Outside, New York hummed on, indifferent and electric. Inside the apartment, something settled, like a long-held breath finally released. 18 months later, Sophie Carter and Ethan Blake co-founded Carter Blake Ethical Ventures, a firm built on the principle that profit and purpose were not opposites. Sophie became CEO. Ethan became the man behind the curtain who made sure she had everything she needed and never once tried to take the spotlight. They launched at the Grand Meridian, the same hotel, the same ballroom. Midway through his presentation, Ethan stopped and looked at Sophie in the audience. "Exactly 18 months ago," he said, "a woman asked me a question I couldn't answer at the time. She asked, 'Why don't you invest in things that actually matter?'" He reached into his pocket. Sophie went still. I've been trying to answer that question every day since. He knelt. And I'd like to keep answering it with you. For the rest of my life. The ring was simple. Platinum band, one small diamond. Engraved inside, $400. She said yes before he finished the sentence. 6 months later, they married in Central Park. The bench where they'd first talked, really talked, had a small bunch of white flowers tied to it. Sometimes, Sophie told the journalist who wrote their story for Forbes, the best investments are the ones you didn't plan. I paid $400 for one night. I got a lifetime. Not a bad return.
Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, just wrapped in a mystery you didn't expect. Sophie didn't plan to fall in love. She planned to survive one evening. But the best stories never go according to plan. Maybe yours won't either. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss the next one. Every like tells me you want more stories like this, and I read every single comment. See you in the next one.